Alright guys, so it's time to talk about a very stupid mistake that I made. See, the 90-gallon bow front has been up now for a little over almost a month, with some errors in between there, mainly to mechanical issues and things like that. But fish keeping for quite a few years in my life now, I've only had an issue with parasites in my tank once, and it was freshwater. I've never run into the problem with saltwater. It was kind of stupid to think that it would never happen to me, but I didn't practice safe fish keeping. Maybe the better way to put it is I went unprotected multiple times when I inserted my fish into the tank without QTing them, putting them in a quarantine tank prior to actually putting them in my tank. And, we used to make jokes and say who actually does that, but the people that do that are laughing at us now. The fact of the matter is, you see this tang right here? You can see spots on him. Those spots are either marine ick or marine velvet. When all these fish were entered into the tank, they weren't done all at the same time. They came in phases. None of them presented with any symptoms of being sick. And in fact, all these fish have been in this tank, including the most recent, for over 2 weeks. And this is the first day that they actually came down with any symptoms. Well, I shouldn't say that. This is the first day they came down with anything visible. You see the trigger up there. Starting about a week ago, he started doing this unusual behavior of flying up and down the side of the tank and occasionally bashing the side of his face into something. Now, he's a little spastic as it is, but this is relatively new. The other night we noticed it more dramatic, and he was basically bashing into the back overflow wall, rubbing his face against it. And we figured that he had maybe stung himself with the anemone, but turns out that was 2 days ago, and now today we have ick. So, zoom out here. One of the first things that you should be aware of is that ick is a parasite. It's not just a nodule on the skin. It's an actual living organism that embeds itself in the skin of the fish. Now, with the huma huma, his skin's kind of pale, so it would be hard to notice these parasite bumps on their skin. The best kind of way to explain it is, on certain fish, it's more apparent, like this tang. And the reason for that is, I'm going to use koi terminology, but the term showa, where it's more fleshy than scaly, that's when you're going to see your nodules, especially on darker colored fish. But on fish like the tang up there, who's got like a real rough sandpaper scaly type skin, it's going to be kind of harder to see those spots because, one, the coloration, and two, they don't form as well on top of the scales as they do underneath the scales. So the ick that's embedded on him is actually mainly underneath his scales, and you may see a bump or two on the surface, but most likely you're probably not going to notice it off first glance at him, especially how fast he's moving, unless he comes up to the tank to eat and you have a good chance to look at him. So what he was doing when he was bashing his face and scrubbing up against the side of that overflow wall was trying to itch those parasites from underneath the skin, because it's most likely irritating and painful. A couple days later, then we start seeing these spots show up. So now this is a little, sad, because there really is no way to treat the ick in the display tank. You're going to hear lots of different myths out there: raise the temperature, feed garlic. There's probably going to be stupid suggestions like dump copper in your tank. No, do not do any of those things, because unfortunately none of them will work. There's only one true method to stop the ick in your fish tank, and we're going to get into that. So the life cycle of this parasite, the marine ick or marine velvet, actually starts in the ocean, where all these fish came from before they were brought here. Before they made it into the United States, before they got distributed to their fish distributor, before they got put into your local fish store, somewhere out there, they came in contact with marine ick. Now, I'm not saying every single fish has it, but there's pretty much a good chance that you may have brought somewhere a fish that had it. And whether or not it survived and made it into your tank, that's a different story. But it comes in either as already attached to the fish, maybe it's an egg on your live rock, or even in your live sand. Once the eggs hatch, the life cycle begins. So the parasites will then free float in the water and attach to the fish, where they will feed, and then they will fall off, and the eggs will land onto the sand, the rock, whatever. And these eggs are pretty much unkillable at that time. They have an impenetrable shell that will lodge itself in there and lay dormant until it hatches in a 28-day cycle. So the spots that you see on these fish, that is the full-grown parasite, and it only survives 2 days to feed on the fish, and then it drops its eggs off into the substrate. Those eggs then last 28 days and then hatch and then find their way back onto a fish. Once you see the spots, you're pretty much guaranteed to know that the number of eggs in your tank are in the billions. It's not, oh, this one fish has it, maybe this fish won't get it. Nope, it's there. There's thousands of them just lying dormant, waiting to hatch, and then find a feasting meal on one of your fish. Sad, but true. Yes, it's probably there in your tanks. Maybe you'll get away with it, maybe you won't. But what winds up happening is sometimes, and this isn't true for everything, the fish immunity is strong and healthy enough to prevent them from catching it as quickly as the rest of them. But once something happens that stresses out the tank, gives them a little weakness in their immunity, this parasite has the ability to take hold. And that's normally when you start to see different things. Usually like these spots, the fish is scratching themselves, acting strangely. That's when you're going to start noticing your symptoms. In order to cure marine ick, or velvet, or whatever you want to call it, there's only really one option. You got to remove its food source. And the food source happens to be your fish. Now, just so we understand this, when I speak of its food source, I'm talking fish, not invertebrates, not coral, not any kind of mollusks or things like that. I'm talking just the marine life fish, the livestock of your tank per se. And the reason I'm saying this is because inverts, coral, mollusks, snails, crabs, whatever, shrimp you want to call it, do not have susceptibility to becoming contaminated with the ick. Ick doesn't feed off of those. So the fish are the only source of food that the ick really depend on. And if you want to kill them, you need to remove the food. So you're taking one part of its life cycle out. Therefore, the rest of the life cycle will die. So there's the problem. You see this tank, it's 90 gallons and I have a lot of fish. And I now have to catch every single one of them, put them in a quarantine tank with nothing else in the quarantine tank for the eggs to fall off when they do fall off. I'm going to have to treat that quarantine tank with a copper solution, but not as drastic as you'll probably see out on the internet, probably about half dose daily. Do 50% water changes every other day for up to 4 weeks until this fish stops showing symptoms. And sadly, in that process, I'll probably lose 1 or 2 fish if I'm lucky. And I'm saying if I'm lucky because this thing could wipe out every single fish in my tank and make me have to start over from scratch. Now, while the fish are in quarantine, curing from their ick, this ick that stayed in the main tank will eventually start to starve off. Now, like I said, it's 28-day life cycle for the larvae or eggs of the ick till they hatch and go into the tank. And then after that, they have 2 days to feed before they can start making eggs again. So 28 days plus 2, that gives us a whole month that the tank would have to be empty of any fish for those eggs to die. And then might as well give it an extra week or 2 just to be on the safe side to make sure there is no living ick left in the tank because it is all starved. And then look at my fish in the quarantine tank, whoever survived, make sure none of them have any visible ick. Change, treat, change, then put eventually the fish back into the main tank when they look perfectly clean, healthy, and ick-free. All the stuff that I've used to basically catch, remove, quarantine the fish, any kind of equipment that has come in contact with the ick-infected fish now has to be treated with fresh water for over 48 hours, because the fresh water will be absorbed into that organism and cause it to burst. The sodium ion membrane that a saltwater organism has uses this salt in the water to pull in water and release water. If you just put fresh water in and their salt is not there, it pulls in water till it explodes because it doesn't have the ability to release the water, missing the sodium ion. That's the reason for it. It's an osmotic membrane. So everything that comes into contact with them will then have to be dipped in water, fresh water, with no salt, for 48 hours to make sure that it is cured of any marine ick that may be remaining on it, so you don't continue to cross-contaminate your fish. It's rough, it's hard, it sucks, and I don't wish it upon anybody, but that is the only way to do it. Do not raise your temperature in your tank to 90 and boil your fish. Do not pour copper in there and kill every single invertebrate in your tank. Do not, continue to cross-contaminate it. Don't say, hey guys, I got my fish, he's sick, I want to get rid of my fresh fish that are living. You want to take one? No, don't cross-contaminate anybody else's tank like that. Don't pour different chemicals in your tank thinking that it's going to cure it. It probably will not, and it will probably kill other things in your tank. If not, just basically cause everything to die in your tank. So that's it, guys. I mean, I hope this never happens to you. I hope that I learned from my lesson, and I will be putting up a hospital tank within the next day or 2 because I need to act quicker. And hopefully all goes well, and if it does, I will continue to show progress, and I plan to learn from this experience and never let it happen again, because it's going to be quite costly in the future replacing these fish.